Okay, I'm delighted to be joined today by Sergi Martin, who is Spanish from Valencia, but living in Prague. A very interesting story with lots of different languages in the mix. So, Sergi, welcome to the channel.
Hello, Olly. Thank you very much for inviting me here to your channel. I'm very excited to see what we can do now.
Yeah, what are we going to do? Let's see.
Woo!
So we're going to be recording a video here on my channel and then also on your channel as well. So everyone should go and check out Sergi's channel, not least because he makes some fantastic videos that are extremely creative, and I'm very jealous of his creativity. So
Come on.
I'm going to ask you a little bit about that. But maybe could you just start by giving us a quick background about your languages and how you have, what is your language picture?
Okay, I speak Spanish and Catalan. As I am from Valencia, we speak Valenciano. Catalan is more or less the same. So I'm native in both languages, and I also speak English because I really enjoyed learning English as a kid at school. And as my wife is Czech, she's from the Czech Republic, I also speak Czech. So I have quite a good level of these four languages, of course, my native languages.
It's very interesting that comment, like, because my wife is from the Czech Republic, therefore I speak Czech. That's not always the case. So I'm curious. I'm curious how. And we're getting very personal very quickly. So feel free to to dodge the question if you want. But what has language learning and Czech meant for you in your marriage? Is it a language that you communicate in with your wife? Did she teach you, or did you learn in order to be able to speak with her? How does it work with you?
Okay, basically we speak Catalan among us, but sometimes also some Czech. Yeah, because we used to live for 10 years in Barcelona and 1 year in Mallorca, 1 year in Spain. So it means in Valencia. So it means 12 years living in Catalan-speaking places in Spain. So her Catalan is more or less like a native. She's like a native. My Czech is quite good. I can communicate very well, but I'm not as good as she is in Catalan. So we speak more Catalan than Czech, but we also speak some Czech. And I started learning as respect, because if she learned my languages, my two languages, why not at least respect her and also learning her language? So I thought it was like quite fair to learn her language, and I love it. I just came here first when we used to live there in Spain. I came here to the Czech Republic, and there were many people that didn't speak Spanish or English, so I couldn't communicate with them properly. So it was very good to me, learning this language.
And I'm curious, because I have so many polyglot friends who have married someone from a different country and who speaks a different language. But unless they actually met in that language, it's actually quite rare for them to speak that language at home.
It is.
So how does that work for you? I mean, can you, with your wife, do you find yourself kind of speaking at length naturally in Czech, or is there always a bit of an effort that you have to make for that?
It's quite natural, and I know it's not normal, and I don't have a real explanation why we can do it, and I understand that 99% of other people don't do it. For example, with my family, when we have some visitors that speak Spanish, like Castilian, I can't speak Castilian with my family because we speak Valenciano or Catalan. Yeah? So it's very difficult to me talking to my mom in Castilian Spanish. So it's very difficult. But with my wife, I don't know, it's kind of natural. And everything started because we met in Spanish. For the first time, we met in Spanish. But she went to some like a language campus or camp or something like that in south of France, in a place where they speak Catalan. So she was for 2 weeks or so just speaking Catalan. She was learning Catalan. And once she called me, and as she was in this environment, in this Catalan environment, she just didn't notice that she was talking to me in Catalan. And I answered her in Catalan. So since that moment, it was that click. Since that moment, we don't speak Spanish. We just speak Catalan.
You began speaking in Spanish. That's interesting because you met in a language that is neither of your first languages. I mean, Spanish is obviously close to your first language,
but yeah.
Yeah, and so and then with so when you were speaking with her in Czech, was it always the case that would she always help you and be supportive and give you practice time with Czech, or did you have to get to a certain level first and then she would talk to you in Czech?
Well, actually, one of the main reasons I am a language teacher is because she used to be a language teacher before I was. So she used to be a language teacher. So she helped me from the start, from the very, very beginning, even though she wasn't a Czech teacher. She was an English teacher. Yeah. So she used to teach English. But Czech is a very difficult language with all the cases and genders and verbal tenses, and it's absolutely crazy. So it was very difficult for her to teach Czech because she's not a certificate teacher. But she helped me a lot to understand why some things are very different than the languages we speak, like English or Spanish.
Yeah, it sounds like a very good kind of partnership between the two of you. And I guess actually living in Prague as well helps, I imagine, for your own motivation.
A lot. A lot. It helps me a lot because, okay, talking about motivation, in the beginning, when I came here the first times for holidays, I was like, how do you say? Like I was in her tail, if that means anything in English.
Yeah, so in her shadow, I guess we'd say.
Shadow, yeah. I was very, very dependent on her because I couldn't say anything in Czech in the beginning. But then when I started learning some Czech, I came again and I started saying my first sentences in Czech to her family, friends who don't speak English, and they were amazed that they said, "Wow, Sergi, you can say several sentences in a minority language," because there are only 10 million Czechs in the world, 10, 11 million. So they were amazed. So that boosted my confidence and my motivation. Yeah. So people saying, "Wow, Sergi, you can speak." It was great to me. And yeah, that helped me a lot. And now that I live here, for me, it's also very good, like not being that dependent. For example, I can call a doctor or make some administrative stuff in Czech. It's not that easy, but I can do it. I can manage it, and it's very good to me, like be independent.
It seems to me that people spend a lot of time focusing on the technical challenges of learning a language, you know, how to learn these cases or how to learn vocabulary, how to pronounce words properly. But it seems to me that really the most important thing of all is motivation, because it's not that just being motivated alone will teach you the language. But if you try to learn a language without the motivation to do it, you're guaranteed to fail. So
yes, I agree.
You have been through this process of learning a number of languages, both as a kid when you were learning English, and then later on learning Czech for family and home reasons, and you also teach Spanish. And so when you think about the idea of motivation and attitude, how do you talk about this, or how do you think about this? How do you communicate this to the people that you teach and the people that you help?
Okay, I always think being a teacher is a kind of like a, how do you say, psychologist maybe. Yeah. So you have to know the student. You have to know what the student likes and what the student doesn't like. And then you try, or at least I try to recommend some exercises, activities, or extra stuff according to what she likes. Yeah. So, for example, if I have now a student who lives in London. She's not from London, but she lives there. So she's, let's say, speaking. She speaks English, but she's learning Spanish, and she likes cinema. So I recommended her a magazine about cinema in Spanish. Because why a magazine? A magazine because it has pictures. So, and the magazine because it's about cinema. So you know that what you are going to read, it's about cinema. That's it. They are not going to talk about quantum physics or whatever other stuff. So it's kind of a limited vocabulary, and it's something. It's also something that she likes. Yeah. So I think it's very important just to get to know the person and recommend the stuff she likes. And always, I'm like, let's say, a workaholic. I'm always like, my life is always thinking about, okay, if this is happening, how can I use this stuff in my lessons, whatever is happening, wherever I'm traveling. I'm always thinking how to use it during my lessons. Sometimes I can use it, sometimes it not. But
yeah, I can see this in you in the way that you talk, and you have clearly so much passion and enthusiasm for languages, and this kind of comes through in your videos. I think your students must be the luckiest students in the world to have you as their teacher, because this that kind of care and attention that you're talking about is so important for students. And I taught languages myself for many years, and I always remember when I lived in Japan, I taught these classes of junior high school kids. I had 40 kids in a room, and everyone thinks that Japanese students are very well behaved and very polite and very organized. The adults are. The kids are not. The kids are just crazy. They haven't been broken into the society yet. And so I would teach these massive groups of kids who were just, half of them would be sleeping on their desks. And one of the things I always tried to do was to use stories that they were familiar with in order to get their attention. So I had one, and there was one lesson in particular that I remember where I was teaching. I've forgotten the English one. Caperucita Roja, Little Red Riding Hood, and I began by showing pictures of Little Red Riding Hood, but then the story changed, and rather than a wolf coming out, it was actually a werewolf, and the werewolf was there in the full moon, and it was quite a gruesome picture of this werewolf, and just by doing that, all the kids who were kind of sleeping, they were kind of sleeping on their desks, and then suddenly they started paying attention and they were engaged, and so that being able to motivate students with things that they like.
Yes,
make all the difference to them, and a lot of these kids then went from not being interested in English to then suddenly being interested through the story. So it's really great what you're describing there. What can students do if they don't have a teacher, if they're learning by themselves? What are some tips that you'd have for students to actually increase that motivation and their consistency if they're learning by themselves?
Okay, they have to find what motivates them, and okay, if in their regular life, in their own language, what they do, what they like to do, kind of like they could replicate that in the other language. As I said, for example, let's say my case, I like classic cars, let's say. Yeah, so I read some magazines, I watch YouTube videos in Spanish about classic cars, like the technique and the design and the story and whatever. So what I do, I follow YouTube channels in English about classic cars. So, and it helps me to keep with my English, that I don't use it very often, English nowadays. But also in Czech, I have a subscription of a Czech magazine about classic cars. So I like reading it. It's just that I don't have to read it because I have to study. No, it's because I enjoy it. I mean, I like the stories, I like the design. So everybody has to find what they like, and if they don't know in another language, just try to replicate what you like in your language.
Yeah, fantastic advice. One of the difficult one of the stages of language learning that people find hardest is this intermediate plateau, where you can already communicate in the language, but then the next challenge you face is moving on to an advanced level, or this kind of fluent in the language, whatever that means. And one of the most difficult elements of that is that it takes a really long time.
Yes.
It takes a lot longer to get from intermediate to advanced than it does from beginner to intermediate. And so you've got to kind of sustain this motivation over long periods of time. So tell me about how that's happened for you in Czech, because a lot of people would have moved to Prague, got to a conversational level, and then said, "Oh, that's enough." How have you actually continued that progress in the language?
I am now in that level that I can't find that motivation to keep progressing, because I am right now in that moment. Yeah, that I don't know exactly, because it's the effort to me just to go one more step. It's so difficult, but in the same time, sometimes I find some kind of sparkle, sometimes like, whoa, this. So now I understand why this is this or whatever. For example, last week I went to a friend's house and he's Czech. And when I ringed his bell, he said, I'm opening. Okay, I'm opening. This gerund doesn't exist in Czech. So they use perfective or imperfective verbs. Grammar, it's very like, wow. But I know that he answered with one way, one word, one kind of one form of the verb that I'm not used to hear. And immediately I asked him why he said that aspect of the verb. And it helped me a lot to understand why he did it or why he didn't. So the point is that every single thing I hear, I read, I watch, I have this tendency to analyze it a little bit. Why they are using these words? If they are using these words in this context, in this context, I can, in the beginning, I can replicate it. I can repeat it in the same context, the same thing. And by repeating it, I will understand why they are using it and how they are using it. And I can expand it to another context or to another verbs, another vocabulary. So to me, like paying attention, a lot of attention.
And this is the idea of noticing, isn't it? About just being actively tuned in and noticing that. They say that there are three conditions for language learning: it's motivation, time, and the ability to notice aspects of the language. And really, those are the three things you've talked about. Right? You're motivated to learn Czech because you live there and your wife is Czech. Yeah. You've given it lots of time. How many years have you been learning Czech now?
Learning, I'm a bit ashamed of saying this, but I started in 2003.
Okay, so lots of time.
You can't.
Lots of time, and then noticing, so being actively noticed. Those are exactly those three conditions there. When you say you're kind of struggling with the motivation to continue to becoming fluent in Czech, is it the case of like you know what you need to do, but you just don't want to do it?
Maybe I know. Maybe I know I should study more like hard. But for me, it's like is that like the effort is so huge.
Yeah, the payback is not worth it, right? Yeah.
No, I mean.
So here's a question for you. Let's say you wake up tomorrow morning with the most motivation you've ever had in the world to become like super fluent in Czech. What would you do?
That's a good question. What would I do? Maybe reading a book.
Reading.
Yeah, I would read a good Czech book. Yeah, and because that's something I don't do. So as I say, I read magazines, But magazines for me are different than books. So books is like literature. There are stories. There are like maybe some classical book from Franz Kafka, great Czech author, or Milan Kundera, another one. So this is very, very difficult. But I would need a lot of motivation to do that. A lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and ultimately, I guess you got to ask, do you read those classic books in your native language? And
I have read some of Kafka's
yeah,
books, and I remember I used to start Milan Kundera's. I don't know how to say it in English. In Spanish, maybe you can say it. It's La insoportable levedad del ser.
the unbearable lightness of being.
That's it. And I was 15 years old, and it was unbearable for me to understand it.
Yeah.
So I just started, and I said, "No, this is not for me." And I never went back to that. But that book is in Spain, so maybe I will pick it
Yeah,
up.
but this kind of goes to the point of like I think often people kind of feel this pressure, like, oh, I need to become fluent, I need to be reading novels and stuff. But then if you're trying to do something that you don't do in your own language,
Yes.
then it's not going to work.
Yes.
And I'm a big believer that we need to try to align our language learning with our lives as much as possible,
Yes.
in order to make it sustainable.
And I was thinking that is something as your story with the Japanese student. I mean, imagine when we were kids, when we were studying at primary school, secondary school, and the teacher said, "Okay, you have to read this classical book from, I don't know, maybe Shakespeare for us, maybe El Quijote or whatever, the classical Spanish literature." I mean, I was 12 years old, I was 15, 14 years old. I was not thinking about that stuff. But then there is some kind of sparkle, something like, wow, oh, look, this is what we like. Yeah? So I think that as a teacher, either you fight with your student or you just go with it and flow with what he likes. They are teenagers, so why not using this teenager literature or
Yeah.
whatever they are doing now?
When I
TikTok.
was when I first started learning Spanish, it's interesting because I'm not a big poetry fan. I'm not a big fan of poetry.
Neither am I.
More so now, funnily enough, as I'm getting older. But I'm not a big poetry fan. But when I first started learning Spanish, I've actually got the book here. I watched an Italian film called Il Postino, and Il Postino is the story of the real life Pablo Neruda, who goes to Italy and meets a very simple postman, and then the postman becomes interested in literature. And so I picked up this book. It's not this exact book. It's 20 poemas de amor y una canción desesperada. A classic collection of poetry from Neruda. And the thing about this kind of poetry is it's not like your typical English poetry. This is full of kind of like revolution and love and passion and stuff like that. And as I was reading this stuff as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, I just kind of really just fell in love with it because it kind of gave me summoned up all these kind of the kind of romantic Latin passion and stuff, and I absolutely loved it. And it's strange that I did enjoy it because I'm not usually a poetry fan, especially not when I was 21. But it just goes to show that languages itself can kind of create new passions for us in unexpected ways.
Yes, yes, that's what I like. I like to again going as a teacher. I like to do what they like, but also trying new things because sometimes there is some coincidence that they like something that they didn't realize they like. Like for example, your example with the poetry. Maybe you didn't know that you liked this kind of poetry because you were not used to it. So it's also always good trying new things sometimes, and maybe bang, you.
So with all this experience that you have, how do you translate this into your teaching with Spanish? So you have a new student who comes to you. How would you describe your core teaching approach with Spanish?
I always, 99% of the times, use a textbook, because there is a path. So to me, when I have some new students saying, okay, I just want to communicate, I just want to go to a restaurant and being able to order or talking or with friends, understanding, blah, blah. Okay, but if you have a book, you have a path. I mean, you have the beginning and the end, because to me, this is like a story. Yeah, and the story is something that has a beginning and has an end, and you know what is the end. You can see the end, the focus, the main goal. Yeah, you know it. But the books I use, that a modern way of teaching, is focused on communication. The communicative approach, I think I would say it in English. And yes, to me, communicate a lot and finding always nice stories. Yes, like these teachers that they are more like storytellers. Yeah, I like this approach too. I can't say I'm a storyteller, but I like going it at stories, amazing stories, interesting stories. Yeah.
Well, talking about teaching through stories, you have made me a lifelong fan of yours already just by doing that. So thank you very much. So it's been fantastic to talk with you. People watching, go and check out Sergi's channel. It's really fantastic, especially if you're learning Spanish. Just to appreciate the creativity that he brings to all of his work. And thanks so much for joining me and talking today.
Okay, thank you very much, and yeah, let's go now to my channel, and
let's go.
we will do another video. Let's go there. Let's go.